and or enough of the story to actually form an educated opinion on it. Anyways,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And it's just, given all the controversy over, this is the second death recently from Border Patrol agents of a Mexican national. Last one apparently being of a man who who not resisted the entire way. All his children are American citizens by birth. And the second the Border Patrol agents apparently got him out of camera viewpoint, he began resisting, and they ended up beating him to death. And the Arizona law that everyone goes to, and the Mexican president's coming up and saying stuff about our gun laws, when the problem's really not our gun laws so much as...
It's their problem. It's them.
It's not so much our gun problems as it is the drug problem that we continue to, that the U.S. government continues to push forward around the entire world, not only Mexico, in its own self.
And also on that whole gun issue, as I talked about then at the time, Mexican president is an asshole. He is. There's no question. I don't care what you say. For you to come out and say that the assault weapons ban is the problem, you're full of shit. Okay? The fact that that would even... Okay, there are not enough people to even bring weapons into the country to have it be a problem.
Well, the question also comes to the fact that a lot of the guns are being seized. When they do seize drug guns, apparently they're coming out of like Czechoslovakia and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't come through the United States first, but you would think it'd be
more.
Yeah, but it's much more likely to come through much.
And also their own military too.
Here. And it's funny too because a lot of Americans, in the case of the Arizona Arizona immigration law thing, which is also a law that's being run through here in Idaho, many other states, including Rhode Island for some odd reason, is that I lost my track of thought. Where was I?
You were talking about the...
Okay, well that's probably
the Arizona law bill.
Oh, that's right, because a lot of conservatives, right, get up in arms when they suggest, like myself, who says that we should have an absolute free immigration policy, right? Because the real issue is not because the people they mentioned. Anyways, first let's answer the Mexico part, because Mexico actually will shoot people coming over their border. Apparently, we do now too, but. I'm sorry, that's a bad joke. I shouldn't have laughed. But,
no.
It's a horrible story. What the hell? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
It's funny too because at least underneath the constitutional basis, I understand you still hold to greatly, and you at least hold greater than I do. It's the fact that each state would determine its immigration policy.
Exactly.
Whereas the federal government would consider the nationalization process. And that's why I said at the time when I heard about the Arizona bill, is it sounds like Arizona is one Hispanics. I'm kind of upset that Idaho wants to do the same thing, but since my end game is New Hampshire anyway.
I wouldn't say that. I'd say that's not true.
It's my opinion. It's my opinion. It's not necessarily how it was written. It's how it's going to be implemented.
Okay, as I said, we'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so let's go on. What was the thing you were bringing up there?
It was basically the BP oil spill was just straining British relations and U.S.-British relations. And in the Australian Broadcast Corporation, Iran tense on anniversary of election violence. Reports from Iran say that there is a huge security presence in Tehran and other cities as the country prepares to mark the first anniversary of President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's disputed re-election. Opposition leaders Mir Hussein Mousavi and Mihrdad Korabi have called off plans to stage fresh anti-government demonstrations over safety concerns as authorities vow to crack down on any new protests.
You mean kill people again?
Well, I've seen plenty of YouTube videos proving that point. Witnesses have reported for several days that there have been massive security presence on the streets of Tehran. Opposition sources say the supporters did not go on the roofs after dark on Friday night to chant Allah Al-Akbar, God is great, a gesture of defiance they began after Mr. Ahmadinejad's re-election. But for the moment, battered into submission, the opposition seems to have run out of ideas. Exactly 1 year ago, angry Iranians marched into the streets in their millions. It was a spontaneous outburst of anger from huge numbers of people who felt that Mr. Ahmadinejad had stolen the presidential election. The Iranian government insisted he was re-elected by a landslide, and the protests were just a Western plot.
It's not like there isn't any kind of precedent towards that. I mean, we're talking about the fact that when Iran kicked out the Shah, it was because the Shah, this is the second time Shah was kicked out, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was kicked out more or less once before, and it was the thought, and we didn't have much, and the United States government didn't have much to say about it at the time until it became precedent that they were going to nationalize the oil fields there. In which case, they went back and overthrew the Republican government that had been formed there, a fairly secular government, mind you.
Which is Mossadegh.
Yeah, well, sorry, Mossadegh, you're right, and put the Shah back in power, and then the Islamic Revolution occurred some years later. For 444 days, some American patriots, some American citizens, supposed citizens, were held by at the embassy by some students at the time. One apparently who was Ahmadinejad, and so there's a history. And when the Shah was put back in power by the U.S. government, it was done through the CIA. So it's not as if there isn't precedent for such things happening. Whether or not it's necessarily true, of course, is questionable.
Right. Any illegal move to disrupt public order and trouble people will not be tolerated and will be dealt with. I was quoted by the state news agency IRNA. Press TV is basically the English international version of state television in Iran. Basically, Max Kaiser, since he doesn't report on Iranian affairs, works for Press TV primarily as the financial news guy.
Okay.
Basically, he works there and he works Russia Today.
Interesting. Yeah, the whole situation is just horrible. I mean, they cracked down and killed people before, and if they step up again, well, they're going to do the same thing. So they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't.
True. And, I mean, there was actually some Americans commenting on the Iranian protest videos where they said, why don't you just get a gun?
Yeah.
And the thing
Hold on,
is...
let me see if I heard that right. After seeing the Iranian protest videos, some Americans said, why don't you just get a gun?
Yes.
As in the people, the citizens should have guns to protect themselves.
Well, it's funny there because, from their own government, where's the guns that Americans use against their own government to protect themselves?
That's... it's mind-boggling, I know.
Let's go ahead and remove this freaking plank from our eye, and if necessary, and hopefully not necessary, take care of our own business before we start telling people to
non-interventionist foreign policy.
Before we tell them, hey, respect there. It's funny too because you remember that in Iraq, it's actually fairly people are worried about the fact that Iraqis right now have AK-47s, right?
Yeah.
But they had AK-47s beforehand.
Yeah. Just
simply having guns does not lead to you being able to fight against, to be able to protect yourselves from your own government, quote unquote, if you can say you own a government or not. And it's also placed here because the NRA, the premier the gun rights people here, are the ones writing the gun control bills. They're the ones who.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are, Chris.
Charlton Heston, the classic. You can take my gun from my cold, dead fingers.
Yes, that came from one of those movies.
No, not from one of his movies. What? Oh.
Maybe from one of it sounds like a movie line, doesn't it?
No, it's actually he was at a.
I know he did say that, but that does sound like a gun. It does sound like an old Western movie kind of statement.
What
I'm saying though is that it's. I can't show you the proof I have of that, but my favorite author, L. Neil Smith, makes a big point of it. When he joined NRA, he joined it for life, and kind of wishes he had it now because he watched as. He, being a much more interested and educated man in this case, right, watched as the NRA